Okay. We are on and it is 6 p.m. And the city is conducting this public meeting using a hybrid model. The city council members will continue to attend meetings virtually while working towards a safe and smooth transition back to in-person meetings. The public is welcome to attend tonight's meeting in person at the Sumner City Council chambers or virtually by using the Zoom platform. Tonight's meeting is also being live streamed through YouTube. Access links and additional information can be located in the city's website and on the meeting agenda. I call to order tonight's meeting of March 21st, 2022 at 6:01 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now I will call for the invocation, Reverend Dion Corselis.
Let us pray. New every day is your love, great God of light. And all day long you are working for good in Sumner and all the world. Holy One, would you stir up in us a desire to serve you, to live peacefully with neighbors and with all your creation, and to devote each and every day, each and every moment, all of our focus and attention to building love in our community, building a safe place for our neighbors, and to listen deeply to each other. Oh God, I pray for wisdom tonight. I pray for mayor, as well as for all of our city council members and for all those who are on this call tonight. God, I pray for wisdom, which comes from you and which comes from our beloved community. And God, we lift up the many needs in our community here in Sumner. And especially we have on our hearts and our minds Pierce County Deputy Dom Collada, who was killed in the line of duty. And we remember his wife and his son and all the family and all the staff that are grieving at this time. And we also lift up a prayer for Pierce County Sergeant Rich Scaniff, who was also shot in the line of duty. God, be with him in his healing and recovery. And for the many families here in the community, God, we lift up Mary Lee and her husband Jim and Joel and their time of grieving and being together. And for all the families that are represented in this lovely community, God, all the needs that are here, we pray for them and hold them in your loving care, oh God. Be with us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Potato,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
Cole,
Here.
Hochstetter,
Here.
Newman,
Here.
Reed,
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
All here. All right, moving to the consent agenda. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting and the special study session of March 7th, 2022 and March 14th, 2022 study session. Item 2, purchase and sale agreement 14009 16th Street East, White River Restoration, Meerdorf. Item 3, Maple Street pedestrian sign backplates consultant services agreement.
Do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda from Deputy Mayor Hochstetter?
Yes, I move we adopt the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Stewart. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. I take it we have no things to remove, so, right? Too late now. There we go. All right. So tonight we have a public hearing on the resolution 1618, the city's 6-year transportation improvement program. If you'd like to provide testimony during the public hearing, please raise your hand so that I may call on you by either pushing the raise hand button or and the participants pad tab on Zoom, or by pressing *9 on your telephone. If you're attending by Zoom, you have the option to be seen through your camera on your computer. If you don't want to be on camera, please disable your video. If you do wish to be on camera, there will be a slight pause after I call your name while we work to upgrade you to a participant. Please begin your testimony by stating your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. So right now, I will open tonight's public hearing at 6:06. And first call on Engineer Michael Kosa to introduce this item.
Good evening, Mayor. Actually, it's Andrew Leach, Public Works Manager, that we're presenting this item.
Okay, thank you. Andrew
No
Lee.
worries. Tonight is the public hearing for the 2023 through 2028 6-year transportation improvement program annual update, also known as our 6-year TIP. This item is a follow-up to last week's discussion at study session. Per state law, the city is required to update its TIP annually and to file a copy of the adopted program with the State Department of Transportation. As part of this requirement, the city must hold a public hearing to provide opportunity for the public to provide comment on the plan. And a few quick highlights of the plan are the Stewart Road Bridge project. We're currently completing the final design, environmental, and right-of-way phases of the project. We're currently looking to start construction in 2024. Another priority project is the 166th Avenue East widening project. We are currently in preliminary design and will be working through a significant environmental phase for the project due to the involvement of a salmon-bearing stream on the project site. And one last highlight is our Alder and Kincaid utility improvement project, which was added to the TIP this year. This project was added due to the project growing to include 2 separate phases, along with the Academy Street Bike Lane project and the Heritage Park Woonworth construction. We're looking to begin construction in just a couple months, and it will be completing next year. The materials for this item are included in the agenda packet, and this item is scheduled to appear as unfinished business for final adoption at the April 4th regular council meeting. And thank you.
Okay. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to speak on this? Anybody from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 6:09. And we will move on to regular unfinished business. Ordinance number 2812, Affordable Senior Housing Regulations. Councilmember Newman, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I move that we approve ordinance number 2812, the Affordable Senior Housing Regulations Ordinance.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Hochstetter. I'm going to ask for Ann or Ryan, Community Development Director, or Ann, whichever one is going to speak on this.
Ann's got it.
Ann, okay.
Thank you.
Ann Siegenthaler.
Thank you, Mayor Hayden. I was waiting to get my video started. Good evening, Mayor Hayden and council members. Tonight, before you for your consideration is Ordinance 2812, which would update the zoning code to increase incentives and options for affordable senior housing. The council reviewed this ordinance previously at 2 study sessions. And at the last study session, council members had comments and concerns regarding a couple of issues. One is the density that was proposed in low-density residential zones. And there were some comments regarding possibly excluding low-density residential from this ordinance. And the other concerns centered around the waiver of commercial ground floor uses, and in particular, commercial ground floor uses along East Main Street and 60th Street East. So since the study session, staff has updated the ordinance as was suggested by several council members. So there are a couple of changes you'll see in this ordinance tonight. One is that the density for low density residential zones was set at 40 dwelling units per acre, as was discussed at the study session. And then the other change is that the ordinance has been updated to maintain commercial ground floor uses along East Main Street and 60th Street East. And I will also note in your packet tonight, there is a staff memo where we have several potential amendments that were requested by council. The first, it's a set of amendments, but the first area is to exclude low density residential zones from the ordinance. So are some amendments there if you wish. And then the second amendment is to raise the proposed density in low density residential from 40 dwelling units per acre, as it is set now in this current ordinance, and raise that to 50 dwelling units per acre, which the council discussed at a previous meeting. So that's it for my summary, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any discussion of this with council? Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. I was raising my hand in anticipation of offering amendments. I don't know if there's still additional discussion prior to going to that point.
Might as well go ahead.
Okay, and then if I might ask the city attorney, it's my understanding I can read the amendments together as one and with one vote versus having to read and vote 4 times. Okay, I just wanted to double check as I go through the process. Bear with me, I have a few, and let me get to the right spot here. First, I move to amend section 7 of ordinance 2812, which amends section 18.12.040. Yes.
You actually can just read the one text that I included in the amendment language that does them all at one time.
I don't know. I see the individuals. I don't know that I see.
You should have received an email on March 15th. You're welcome to do it however you wish, but if you'd like to summarize it into one amendment and not individually, you're welcome to.
Okay, I see it here. I move to amend section 7 and 11, ordinance 2812 to specifically remove each reference to senior housing as an allowed use in the low density residential districts.
Okay, so we have an amendment. Do I have a second for that? Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Brown. All right. So do we have any other discussion? Hold on. Yeah. We have any other discussion on this item? Oh, Councilmember Newman.
Sorry, not on this item. I have my own amendment to offer after we get through this one.
Councilmember Reed, did you have more?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to the amendment.
Okay, please do.
So the reason I brought forth the amendment is, although unlikely, I have concerns of the unintended consequence of opening up or changing the LDR for senior housing, especially with the 1 acre requirement. It's my understanding that should an acre be acquired through one or multiple lots in any of the residential low density residential areas, that it would then permit the building of a senior complex. And I recognize there are some areas of the LDR that would make sense, but opening it in a blanket form kind of, it leaves me with concern. And I was hoping to remove that. And maybe it could be addressed in other ways, either through rezoning or other avenues versus opening it up to the entire LDR.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Andrea, do we vote on this right now, or do I get all the all the discussion first? Okay, Councilmember Hochstetter.
Thank you. I won't speak for or against that amendment, but I'll just talk in general that the affordable senior housing has been one of the items that we've heard the most from our citizens. So I'm glad we're addressing this and hoping that we are making it where that is something that will join our community. And I just appreciate the staff researching this as much as they did and giving us good ideas on how to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Newman.
So I don't think that I will be supporting the amendment because I think the senior housing element like needed in Sumner is really critical. I think probably share, I do want to like at least acknowledge that there's the potential risk that Councilmember Reed has mentioned before in terms of how things could be done. I do think it's very like low risk in terms of someone buying up properties and tearing down homes instead of buying currently available properties where this actually makes a lot of sense and would be allowed to do. If that becomes a concern, I would not mind us exploring the possibility of going through the comp plan process to rezone some of those LDR areas that make sense. But in the meantime, I don't actually want to delay opening up those options for people while we go through that process. Anyway, so I won't actually be voting for it, but I do appreciate both like the process and consequence concerns.
Thank you. Any other discussion on ordinance number 2812? Councilmember Newman.
Yeah, sorry, you said ordinance 2812 instead of the amendment. So I just want to make sure that the vote that we're about to take is only specific to the amendment, because then I have one to offer afterward.
Okay.
Councilmember Newman,
Yes.
take your motion to amend now, and then we'll vote on both of the amendments after they're on the floor.
Okay, great. Sorry. Then if now, Mayor, may I?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I do move to amend specifically section 11 of ordinance 2812, and that amends section 18.24.060, property development standards in a PRDs subsection D2A. This is super easy, right? So that the base density for senior housing and low density residential zones may be increased up to 50 dwelling units per acre through a PRD. Instead of 40. And then after others, I'd like to speak to that if I can get a second on the amendment.
Yes, I'll second that.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Hochstetter. Okay, take it away, Charla.
Thank you. So my reasoning for offering the amendment is actually twofold, possibly three. One, I don't want our low units like with 40, like I don't think we know enough about the private market. I don't want to accidentally make it basically not profitable enough or make it not worthwhile for developers. Like usually the more density they can get out of a development, the more inclined they would be to build it. And So I would like to not mess with that and like at least set a standard of 50 units. I also think that we I guess I do have 3 reasons. We do a really good job with increasing our buffers, our buffers along these projects so that it's not like you will be really close up to 50 units. It's much further apart. And so the impact really wouldn't be noticeable. The difference between 40 and 50 units really would not be noticeable. And we are already making the rest of the regulations to have a low impact on neighboring areas. And then I guess the third reason is because I actually think it is to our benefit. The more senior homes and housing units that we can make available in one spot actually then decreases the impact that we would have across town if we were putting multiple multi-unit structures all over in these low density areas. So if we can get it, like if we can make it so it's easier to get our housing needs in one area, I actually think that is to the benefit of all of our other neighborhoods.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have something to say about this one? Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it kind of ties together with my earlier concern. I do support the 50 unit over 40 in the multifamily commercial and or the multifamily and the commercial areas designated in the underlying ordinance, but I would not support the 50 units in the low density residential neighborhoods. So I am mixed on that, but I wanted to point out that as far as the multifamily zoning is concerned, I do support it there.
Thank you. Okay, so well, we go back to Councilmember.
So Mayor, you'll want to see if any member of the public wishes to speak to either
Oh,
amendment
yeah.
before we take a vote.
Well, we have a comment from Councilmember Brown too, so we'll take that one. Councilmember Brown.
Yes, I appreciate what Ms. Newman wants to do, but I'm concerned about the community impact of 50 units, more so than a builder's profits.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, we go back to, let me see, Councilmember Newman's amendment. And could the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor, may I ask a question? Does it go back, is it in the order presented or is it reverse?
It's reverse.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to push that. You need to light it up.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Reed,
No.
Potato,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Brown.
No.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Brown, what was that?
That was no.
Thank you.
5-2, yeses win. So let's go to Councilmember Reed's amendment. Michelle, could you call the roll?
Stewart,
When we voting on number
Council-
this is
Councilmember Reed.
Councilmember Reed's amendment.
He did 4 of them.
Councilmember Reed's. No, he did them all in one.
He did.
Mhm.
Okay. No.
Reed,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
No.
Newman,
No.
Potato,
No.
Cole,
Yes.
That would be 4-3, so it passes with no. Yeah, it fails with no. Sorry about that. All right, so we have 1 no and 1 yes, so. Okay, moving on. Did anybody want to speak to that after? Are we good to move on?
You'll need to take a vote on the ordinance as amended.
Oh, yeah, okay. Now we need to take a vote on ordinance number 2812, affordable housing regulations as amended.
would you like me to call
Michelle,
the
would you
roll?
like to call the roll?
Thank you. Cole,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Reed,
No.
Stewart,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
Yes,
Potato,
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
6-1 for as amended. All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any public that would like to comment? Seeing none, no public. We will move on to new business. Ordinance number 2815, 2021, 2022 biennial budget amendment. Councilmember Reed, would you like to make a motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move we adopt ordinance 2815, the 2021, 2022 biennial budget amendment.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
yes, I'll second that.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor Hochstetter. And I'm going to call on Financial Officer Cassandra Raymond.
Good evening, everyone. So we are now in the second year of our 2021-2022 biennial budget. And before you is ordinance number 2815, a budget amendment for the first quarter for the 2021-2022 biennial budget. As we enter into this second year, we are looking at funding some capital out of our real estate excise tax. This is a revenue stream. This is a special revenue that results from the sale of real estate within the city limits. This revenue is restricted by statute to a variety of capital uses. When we adopted the 2021-2022 budget, we did not appropriate any use of this fund. We wanted to wait and see what the needs are, what the needs were during the biennium. So we are coming to you today to use some of those REIT funds to support a variety of capital projects within the city. The first one is transferring $800,000 from the REIT fund to the Park Capital Fund. This is to support the Heritage Park Woonruff property development. And then it recognizes the transfer in and the expenditure in the Parks Capital Fund. Next, transferring $400,000 from the REIT fund to the Parks Capital Fund. This is to support acquisition of a property on Kincaid and then recognize the transfer in and expenditure in the Park Capital Fund. Third, transferring $250,000 from the REIT fund to the Street Capital Fund. And this is to support right-of-way acquisition for the Wood and Main Improvement Project. We'll also be using this amendment to recognize $75,000 capital contribution from Pierce County to support the Heritage Park Plaza project. And then finally, a transfer of $120,000 from the general fund to the Park Capital Fund. And this is to support environmental activities on the Heritage Park project. So that is the summation of the first quarter 2022 budget amendment. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions for Cassandra? No questions. So there we go. Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you to Cassandra and team on the work you guys do every year with moving the numbers and making it all work. It really shows in the bottom line, not only for the projects getting accomplished, but keeping the city sound financially. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Botetto.
I was wondering, what is the Kincaid property that you're wanting the money for?
So I will actually, I'm seeing who on the meeting is best to answer that question. I see Ryan has his hand up.
Thank you, Cassandra. Good evening, council, mayor and council. The city is looking at purchasing the property at 902 Kincaid, which was years ago was the old post office. It's property just south of the Heritage Park. So we have been in communication with the property owner, made a formal offer, and we're kind of in a negotiation stage. We have a consultant working for us, working us through that, taking us through that process right now.
Okay. Are you going to be purchasing the parking lot behind there or just
Yes,
the building?
The parking lot would go with it. Yeah, the parking lot
okay.
is currently leased to the Sumner Woodworkers store for additional parking for their store.
Oh, okay. But you are purchasing it. That's
We're
a
hoping to.
good plan. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Mr. Stewart.
Cassandra, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm just curious, how much money does this leave in the REIT fund after we withdraw this roughly 1.5 million?
Sure. So at the end of 2021, we had about 1.58 million in the refund. We're estimating collections about $800,000 in 2022. That's relatively conservative, but we do think that's a safe estimate. So after these uses, we'll have about $930,000 remaining in the refund at the end of 2022.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Do we have any public that would like to speak on this? Seeing no public. Clerk, call the roll.
Potato,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
Yes.
Cole,
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now we're moving on to ordinance number 2018 compensation schedule update. Say that 3 times fast. We have Jeff.
Do I need to make a motion first?
Would you please, Councilmember Potato, would you please make a motion first?
Yeah. I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2814, 2022 compensation schedule update.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a double second. And now we have Jeff Stephens. Yes. It was seconded by Earl Stewart. Thank you.
With the feminine voice.
Yes. Yours was louder. His was first. All right.
Good
Mr.
evening.
Stephens, go for it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The city is required to pass an annual compensation schedule. Tonight's ordinance number 2814 establishes the rates of pay for temporary and seasonal pay grades. This ordinance also simplifies the pay bands and increases salaries to account for the current labor market as well as inflation. The timing of this ordinance is important as the city is currently recruiting for several seasonal laborers at both our public works departments and the parks departments. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Stephens? No questions. Anybody in the public that would like to speak with this? No public. Kind of quiet. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Brown,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Hochstetter,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Potato,
Yes.
Cole.
Yes.
Unanimous. Okay. Wow, we did it. That is the end of that. Now we're going to call for reports. Councilmember Cole.
Yes, I want to give an update on what transpired at this past Wednesday's Rainier Communications Commission meeting. So that was on the 16th. We reviewed the interlocal agreement again. The changes were mostly a separation between services and the ILA. At this point, it's pretty much good to go, but we'll take another look at it at the May meeting, which is May 18th. And then the services agreement will follow that. Actually, it'll come out before May 18th. There was an agenda item about the RCC lease. The lease extension is currently routing. It's now with Pierce County. It's already been signed by Bates Technical College. And the extension actually is just sort of buying time to renegotiate the full lease, which will go through December 2023. And they're only allowed to spend budget through December 2023. The commission is also submitting a request to Comcast for an HD channel. It'll be channel 322. The commission will draft a single letter on behalf of all the cities. In addition, there are a couple more items. There will be a public launch of closed captioning. I guess it was planned earlier, but now they're moving it back to sometime in April to let the public know that it's available, but it is accessible now. There has been a recruitment to hire an intern. It actually closed, I think, the day after the meeting, so on the 17th. The commission received approval to hire one new FTE, and that FTE will be responsible for the majority of the producing. And they are hoping to onboard that new employee in second quarter of 2022. And lastly, the commission is purchasing a new production vehicle. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Councilmember Potato.
After last week's tragedy with the sheriffs, just want to appreciate all the safety that our community has because of our public safety officers, and just wish that they keep safe, because I think after seeing the videos of the body worn cameras, it really brings to light, what they have to face whenever they pull somebody over, or, have to do their job. So I just really appreciate what they do. So just hope they keep safe.
Thank you. Councilmember Newman.
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Newman, do you think you could give a short report on the convention you went to this last week or so?
Not yet, and I'll call you afterward.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Reed, did I already call on you? All right, I guess it's my turn. I also am saddened by the events that happened with the police officers, and being the daughter of a police officer, I totally get how hard it is for the families. So not much you could say, but I'm really sorry for the families. So with that, no executive session tonight, but we have Jason Wilson, City Administrator, ready to give a report.
It's on. Thank you. Good evening, Council and Mayor. A couple items for tonight. Next week's study session, we'll be hearing an update from the Cultural Arts Commission regarding their 2022 work program. You'll also be getting an update on the ARPA committee and their recommendation to amend the budget to allocate additional ARPA funds. and further discussion regarding the multifamily tax exemption expansion. At the next regular council meeting on April 4th, the Parks Master Plan approval for Bennett property and Siebenthaler Parks is on the agenda, as well as 2 resolutions authorizing the RCO grant application approval process. The transportation improvement plan that you had the public hearing on tonight will also be considered, and an ordinance amending the budget for those ARPA fund allocations. Additionally, it is April, and April brings all of our commissioner appointments and reappointments. So we'll be starting that process on April 4th, where we'll be reappointing and appointing several new members to volunteer on our commissions. If the public's interested, we are still accepting applications for several of those boards and commissions. I encourage you to get involved by going to our website and looking for those applications. We do have a special study session tonight. So council, if you could stay on this Zoom meeting, and we'll be rearranging some things here technology wise, and then we'll start in just a few moments. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Seeing none, I adjourn this meeting at 6:41. Hang tight and we will open our study session.
Increase their volume, or can you do that?
How much time between meetings do we have?
About 2 minutes.
Boy, you're generous.
Were you going to run to Fred
I can
Meyer's?
hardly hear them. Is there a way to put that through here? Or is
It is coming through here, but the system is set up to where it's louder over here than here.
It's red. Okay, that's hot. Okay. All right, I'd like to call the order the special study session of March 21st, 2022 at whatever time it is, 6:45 PM. All council members are present. And the study session business is one item on the agenda tonight, and it is Public Records Act and Open Public Meetings Act Art Training, Council Training. We're going to call on City Attorney Andrea Marquez and Deputy City Attorney Maylee Barber.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. We are here tonight to give you our annual presentation related to the PRA, the OPMA, social media use, and then we'll wrap up at the end with a question and answer session. So feel free to interrupt us if there are questions that arise during our presentation, but also know that we will have an opportunity for questions at the end. These topics, while they're not the most exciting topics in the world to listen to, they are hugely important and they carry giant liability for the city. So making sure that you all feel comfortable and empowered to follow them, that you have all the information you need in order to comply with them is extremely important. So we appreciate your time tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Maylee. She will start the presentation.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Yes. All right. I'm your Deputy City Attorney, Maylee Barber. And if you ever forget how to say my name, it's like Haley with an M, right? So if you have to interrupt, just say Maylee. So going to the Public Records Act and Open Public Meeting Act, and it looks like our PowerPoint.
Just a second. Yeah, it stopped working on me. Just one moment. I apologize. I'll pull it back up.
While she's pulling that up, this is going to be an exciting presentation, but it's also going to be equally as scary. So when we give you those examples from different cases in different cities, don't think we're saying anything about you personally, but I'll give you some quotes from some articles. And we know that your intent is good, but some of these articles are kind of scary towards the council members that they're describing. So we'll start with the Public Records Act, right? Chapter 4256 of the RCW, all public records of state and local agencies to be made available to the public. And this is liberally construed in favor of disclosure, right? And so in the legal department, here our motto is, when in doubt, send it out. So next slide. What is a public record? And if you go to section 3 of the definitions, it's any 1, writing containing information, 2, relating to the conduct of government or the performance of any governmental or proprietary function, 3, prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristic. So that's basically everything. Looking at this slide, you've got, all of this, which is kind of scary. And keeping in mind, we're going to talk a little bit about social media later, but everything in this capacity is public record. Keeping in mind that we can't capture any active phone calls that you have, but we have to give over, phone call logs and that a phone call existed. So what is relating to the conduct of government? It's information that refers to or impacts the action, processes, and function of government. Anything created in the course of carrying out the duties, functions of government work, but even if only indirectly. So giving a quick example. So if I go into my city email and I forward an email to my husband to remind him to buy a Metro Animal Services calendar, right? Is that really government related? It is kind of indirectly. And so we'd probably give that email out. And so then all of a sudden that public records requester is going to know who my husband is, his email address, maybe how many calendars we end up buying. So even though it's indirectly, it gets a little bit messy. So prepared, owned, used, retained by the city. So a person who conducts public business, a person who acts as an agent in official capacity. And then I think the most important part of the slide is 1, does the job require it? 2, is the employer directing it? And 3, furthers in the employee's interests. And so that's important, and we might talk about that a little bit later. So personal email and cell phone. What is the tip? The tip here is do not use your personal device, your personal email account, your personal cell phone, or your personal social media for council business. And why are we so paranoid? Why does this matter? Because it's a very expensive lesson. And go to RCW 4256-550, section 4. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but there's some highlighted portions. So when the person sues us and they prevail, they're awarded all costs, including reasonable attorney's fees. And that's arguable too. What's reasonable attorney's fees? I mean, it's going to be a lot. Incurred in the connection with such legal action. And you could think about this as $100 per each day per item that they're not getting. This is huge. Yes, $100 per day per record. I like the gulp at the end of that slide too.
And Maylee, just to jump in really quickly, the statute of limitations on these lawsuits is 1 year. So seasoned public records requesters know to wait 364 days so that the penalties have accumulated over that amount of time. And they're getting $100 per day per record that they allege wasn't sent out. So the fees can really add up quickly.
Yes, and we'll end up talking about that a little bit later too, because Andrea makes a good point. These are seasoned plaintiffs, right? They're going to wait till the last day, $100 per day for 364 days. So let's talk about a case, Fortner versus the city of Bainbridge Island. And this one's actually sued by, the plaintiffs are two people. So it's Paulson and Fortner, but it's just cited Fortner. Paulson's a Bainbridge Island blogger, and Fortner was, as described in an article, a leader in the successful 2009 campaign to change the city's form of government. And so they requested emails from all council members, and actually only one of the council members responded with emails from the personal email. What their concern was that council members were using their personal email to correspond with the public to get advice on issues before council. And that's what they were doing. And so let's see, one of the requesters, and I thought this was an interesting quote, said, this was the person who asked for the public records and ultimately sued, said, "The last thing we want to do is sue the city. But the way the Public Records Act is written, we have to sue the city in order to require rogue officials to obey the law." So in this lawsuit, 3 council members were personally sued. So they were personally named and in their roles of a council member. So they sued the city. So the court ruling, and you can see, is that the city and the council members violated the PRA in destroying public records and did an inadequate search to recover deleted emails. And the court ordered the council members to turn over the computer for forensic inspection. They ordered sanctions and attorney's fees. And let's see, and here, and actually, can you go to the next slide? Sorry, Andrea. One of the quotes that I saw from an article that I thought was interesting also said, in response to the council members, they've had advice from city attorneys and have had and received a training about their duties as public officials, but they continue to ignore the law. Council members even admitted in writing that they had deleted emails. And so the court actually also talked about how the council members ignored city policy to preserve public records. And you can see right here, there was a settlement, $350,000 settlement. And I saw at least 2 other articles that argued that it was closer to about $500,000 in settlement. So the court ruling was that they violated the PRA, as I read, destroyed public records and so on, but $140,000 in legal fees to the plaintiff and the requesters, $245,000 in legal costs paid by the city. So in Bainbridge Island, they had to hire an outside firm, contract city attorney to represent the city, and then a different contract firm to represent the council members. So that's why the fees are just outrageous. Eventually, a council member resigned.
Right. So the next case is West V Vermillion, and Mr. Vermillion was a former council member for the city of Puyallup. And during his campaign, he started a private website and private email address to correspond with his constituents. After he was elected, he continued to receive emails from the public and city staff and members of the community to that campaign email address. If he thought that it was important and it required a response, he would forward it to his city email address, and then he would delete the email from his private inbox. He was very mindful to use his city email address for any city business after he was elected. But a very well-known public records requester put in a request for all communications received or posted through the council member's website and email account, that campaign website and that campaign email account. The council member and the city of Puyallup refused to turn over or search those emails, claiming a right to privacy on those personal accounts. And they also argued that none of those were created in his, quote, official capacity. Remember when Maylee went over the definition of what makes a public record. The court held, not so fast. You have no right to privacy if you're creating public records, no matter where they were created. If you have public business in your private email account, or if you have communicated about city business with constituents through your private website, they are still public records and they're subject to search. So the court ordered the council member to search for and produce all of his public records on that account, on those accounts, under penalty of perjury. Now, in some cases, courts will require a forensic search and actually do an in-camera review in court of people's personal accounts to make sure that all public records were disclosed. So here's what the court had to say. The public has a right to inspect public records located on a personal computer unless the records are, quote, highly offensive to a reasonable person and are not of legitimate public concern. That is a really high bar. We know that's a really high bar because virtually nothing falls into that category in the world of public records other than deceased bodies. So the takeaways from that case, this same rule applies to private Facebook accounts, text messages on your personal cell phone, your private email accounts, documents that were created on your home computer. Know that if you've created a public record and you're conducting city business on any private device or private account, it will be subject to search. They are not privileged. You have no right to privacy in public records that are created on those devices. And so if we get a request that has that is relevant to anything you've created on your private devices, you will be asked to search. You will be asked to search in good faith. You'll be asked to turn over any records that were disclosed in that search. And if you can say honestly that there are no responsive records to the request, then you'll be signing an affidavit to that effect. That is the way the city can insulate itself from these types of requests. So, best practice, don't use your personal devices. It's really that simple. Please stick to your city email account if you're conducting city business. If somebody emails you on your private account, forward it to your city account before you respond. If somebody emails or sends you a message on your private Facebook account through a private message, forward it to your city council Facebook page. And if you don't already have one, the communications department is glad to set you up with one. The moral of this story is anything that you create on a private device is subject to public record. Go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I think I'm the only one that has an actual city council Facebook page, and although it's a pain to set up, once it's set up, it actually works pretty good, and it backs up. My understanding, Brian said that it backs up to a content management system that will retain all of the necessary stuff out of that particular account.
That's absolutely right. So in addition to the city's ability to search for responsive records, they're being archived appropriately because we have retention requirements from the state Secretary of State that we have to comply with. And so that includes all public records, whether they're sitting on your home computer, your personal cell phone, or your city Facebook account. So the added benefit, Councilmember Reed, you're absolutely right, is the ability to archive all of those records.
And just be aware, if you do set one up like that, the connection breaks frequently, but it's easy to reconnect for the archiving. And I think it's something to do with it. I think Brian identified it's something to do with Facebook, that they reset or update something and it like kicks you out or logs you out and you have to log back into the archiving system. It's usually just a few clicks, but it happens every month or two, I think.
Thanks for bringing that up. I don't know if staff was already aware of that, but I know that Communications Director Carmen Palmer is on here this evening viewing this presentation. And so we'll be sure to do whatever we can to try to fix that glitch. That doesn't sound pleasant.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to move on to social media posts. Oh, Councilmember Reed, did you have one more comment?
No, I'm good now. Sorry. I'll bring it down.
Don't be sorry. So social media posts, the tip here and the way to comply with the Public Records Act, but also still be able to converse with your constituents and provide as much information as possible on your social media is to link or share information that the city's posted, reshare publicly available information, reshare links that are on the city's website, link to social media posts that have been created and well thought out by our incredible communications staff. That is one way to say, I didn't create this content. I was merely reposting publicly available information, and therefore my private devices are not implicated. So the next case that really hammers this home, and a lesson that was difficult to learn, was another City of Puyallup case. It's West versus Puyallup. And this has to do with a private Facebook called Friends of Julie Dorr. And as you can see here on the slide, the purpose was to provide information to her constituents and supporters. Julie Dorr was very good at reposting city links and information that was already on the city's website or city social media accounts. Here are a couple of examples of what she posted to her Friends of Julie Dorr website or Facebook page. So when she refused to turn over those documents on that Facebook account, she was sued, and so was the City of Puyallup. And the court said, yes, those are writings, so they constitute records, and they reference city functions, so they were related to city business and they further the city's interests, but she didn't prepare them. They weren't part of her official capacity to repost links, right? She didn't put in any thought into the content. She didn't create anything. She merely reposted. And so that was enough for the court to say it was not a public record and it did not need to be turned over. So the takeaways from that case, and it could have come down differently, frankly, had she even written in the caption, what do you guys think about a snowplow? And then posted the snowplow route, right? If she had invited discussion or come up with her own content, the court could have come down differently. But in this case, the court said it wasn't public records. They weren't required to be disclosed. And so the questions you should ask yourself when you're posting are, does your job require it? As a city council member, as an elected official, are you required to post this type of information? Is your page your official page or is it your private page? And try to distinguish the content that's being posted based on whether it's personal or private. And then what you're posting, does it amount to city business or further the city's interests? And again, just disseminating general information, the courts have been very clear on that you are not creating separate public records that would require a search of your personal devices. I will turn it back over to Malin.
Thank you, Andrea. So it's a huge staff impact of public records. I can tell you a couple weeks ago, when Andrea and I split up a couple of public records requests, she had two different cases, I had one case, and we were reading thousands of emails, and not only us, directors had to review their own emails to see if this matched up. It's just a huge amount of time. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the more recent ones at the end of this section, but who knows where the city of Mesa is? I thought I knew most of the cities in the city of Washington. Oh, yes. Okay, good. Great. Deputy Mayor knows where it is. I thought I knew most of the cities, but I think the slide is helpful because it's where the city of Mesa is. So then Zinc versus the city of Mesa. I should clarify, it's the 2007 case because believe it or not, Zinc has sued the city of Mesa multiple times and multiple cases have gone to the Court of Appeals. More recently, one where the petitioner was kicked out of a city council meeting because she wanted to record it and they wouldn't allow her. And so she sued as a violation of the OPMA. But this one, what I'm talking about, is a 2007 one. And it has to do with Zinc being homeowners. They were petitioning for judicial review of the city's termination of their building permit. In addition to suing for that, they were also suing for violations of the OPMA. So from 2002 to 2005, the Zincs made 172 public records requests. And so that example I just gave you a couple of weeks ago, Andrea and I were working on only 3 public records requests. So that should give you an idea. 172 public records requests, mostly related to the city's decisions regarding the building permit. They were not happy with the city's responses to the requests, and then the Zincs filed the PRA lawsuit to the city. So the trial court said that it was impossible for the city to comply with the PRA considering the number of requests and the limited manpower in that city. And also that trial court said, the Zincs requests amounted to harassment, 172, right? So then we go to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals disagreed. They disagreed on the harassment charge, and they said, trial court, you got to go back and you got to decide if the city strictly complied with the PRA. So it goes back to the trial court. And the trial court there acknowledged that the city was small. So that's important, that the city, they reduced the penalties because of the city manpower. But the trial court said the city did not comply with, and 33 total violations led to $352,955 in penalties. The penalty exceeded, this was an example of that amount in relation, exceeded 100% of the city's 2015 annual general fund tax revenues, and it would cost $350 per resident. So in that instance, the trial court reduced the penalties, you can see, to $25,746. So then that goes to the appellate court because the Zincs appeal, and the appellate court agreed. They agreed it was lawful to adjust the penalty down. So that's kind of like one good point out of this case in the PRA. But the goal of the penalty is to deter future misconduct. And out of this case, the courts have discretion in assessing penalties and got rid of the no longer penalty per day fee, but you still have that maximum of $100 per day. So what they did talk about was that the trial judge had broad discretion in determining the reasonableness of the fee award. So requesters have a variety of intents, right? So intent does not matter. And that kind of shown with the City of Mesa case, right? The 172, that's obviously harassment. It doesn't matter. And the courts look only to the city's response and compliance with the PRA. So the takeaway is, if you create a record, expect it to be requested and expect legal to ask you to search. And so when I said I was going to talk about a recent public records example, and Andrea can add too, we did have a records request from a known and seasoned requester. And it was a massive public records request, a lot of manpower, a lot of hours. And this same person, like Andrea brought up, waits typically to like the day before the end of the year and then sues the city. So that person alone that we're aware of has sued over 30 cities. They're seasoned. They've been awarded over $1 million. And so when you know about things like that, it makes you a little bit nervous in the sense of like, we cannot miss one document. That's $100 per day. I wanted to go a little bit about too the length of these lawsuits. Is anybody familiar with the Nissan versus Lindquist case? And that's with our, I see some smiles and nods, our previous Pierce County prosecutor. That case alone took about 8 years. And then you saw the City of Mesa example, 2007, and then they were talking about revenues from 2015. These take years and years and years. So some takeaways: intent doesn't matter.
Intent doesn't matter, and there are people that make their living putting in public records requests and hoping that cities make minor little technical errors or huge errors in responding. And so we pay a lot of attention to these requests, and we spend a ton of time trying to get them right. So know that every time we ask, it's because we don't want that liability to come back down on the city. So again, just another reminder, we're peppering it throughout the presentation. Ask yourself before you post, could I post this if I wasn't an elected official? Is it publicly available information, or did I learn it in my capacity as a city council member or mayor? Would I post this if I wasn't an elected official? Am I merely telling my neighbors and friends about the daffodil parade? Or is this something that is intricately involved in the city's budget, right? Would an average citizen that's not involved in the city government be posting this? And then, was I asked to post or disseminate this information, or does it further the city's interest? If the answer is no to all of those, post away. If not, give it some pause. Make sure you're sending it from a public email or a public device so that it's being archived and so that it can be searched easily. Switching gears to the Open Public Meetings Act, but before we do that, are there questions about the Public Records Act that are lingering? Go ahead, Councilmember Botetto.
I was wondering, like on Facebook, it would be unwise to comment. I mean, if somebody commented on something you posted and you shouldn't reply back, would that get you involved? If it was on your private, like the Julie Dorr example?
Yes, if it's a private Facebook account and there are comments back and forth in the comment section, those are likely to be public records if they are involved at all with city business. So our advice is to create a city Facebook account if you commonly interact with your constituents about city business. If you do not want a city account, just know that your private account will be subject to search if we get a request for Councilmember Botetto's private Facebook messages, for example.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Cole?
Yes, so my question is, I actually had a constituent reach out to me to tell me about some noise in her neighborhood. And I actually have not called her back, but it is my intent to do so. So sounds to me like I really should not be calling her from like my home phone.
So telephone calls, that's a really good question. Telephone calls are a little bit different because there is no way, we are not recording your telephone calls. Your call log could potentially be subject to search, but I don't know that there's much in a call log that council would be concerned about. Unless you would like a city issued cell phone to conduct all of those telephone calls on, then just know that your call log would likely be subject to search.
Okay.
But you can use your home phone to call your community members back. And if we get a request that somehow implicates that telephone call, we'll work through it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move on to the Open Public Meetings Act. So all meetings of the governing body of a public agency shall be open to the public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend. We have seen through the pandemic that this has taken several shapes and sizes, but the gist is that members of the public must be able to see the meeting and they must be able to be heard at the meeting. So when does the OPMA apply? Anytime there's a meeting of a majority of the governing body. So in our case, that's 4 or more. Even a telephone call or a video conference constitutes a meeting if it satisfies the limits of the OPMA. A meeting is only subject to the OPMA when action is being taken. So action is just about anything that includes city business, discussions, deliberations, even things short of a final vote are considered action at a meeting. And final action is as obvious as it sounds. It's that final vote. It's the deliberations that lead to a final action or adoption of city business. So when does the OPMA apply? Whenever four or more gather formally or informally to discuss or transact official business. We've come up with a short list here, but there are other examples that would probably fit into this. So regular council meetings and study sessions, working lunches, retreats, emails where folks reply all. So that's why every time an email goes out to all of the city council that involves city business, typically you'll see, please do not reply all at somewhere in the body of that email. Group text messages. These can get out of control pretty quickly, especially with iPhones when you can add people as easily as you can to group discussions. You can very quickly get 4 or more council members talking about a topic before you even realize that it has become a meeting open to the, or that should have been open to the public. Phone conferences, and then committee meetings. Council committee meetings where more than 3 members are present is difficult when it comes to the OPMA. And often if we know in advance, we err on the side of caution and we'll go ahead and we'll advertise that meeting and provide notice because a quorum will be present. So for regular meetings, the public is entitled to 24 hours notice of the agenda, and our meeting times have to be set by city code, and they are. They're the first and third Mondays of every month at 6 p.m. For special meetings, the public is likewise entitled to 24 hours notice of the agenda. The difference between a special meeting and a regular meeting is at special meetings like tonight, anything that's not on the agenda cannot be discussed. So you are limited to only the items that are on the agenda. And that 24-hour notice period is set by state law. It's in statute, and it has been used against cities. So the most recent example is when the Seattle City Council was intending to repeal the head tax in 2018. And they had a meeting published to the media, a special meeting, only 23 hours and 51 minutes in advance of that intended repeal. And you bet they got sued. And they ultimately settled it several weeks later after motions and attorney fees and you name it for $35,000 in 2019. So to echo Maylee's comment she made earlier, these lawsuits drag on and on and on and on, and they become very expensive. So every meeting that is subject to the Open Public Meetings Act requires minutes be recorded and then published for public inspection. All ordinances, resolutions, rules, regulations, orders, any official business of the city can only be adopted in an open public meeting. There are very, very limited exceptions to this for emergencies. And the most important thing about the OPMA is that it encourages transparency by requiring all discussion before the council on city business to occur during those open public meetings, not in private closed door meetings. So that means if there is a topic that is before the city council during a meeting, and there are comments from the council members on that topic, please make them during the meeting. It is much more difficult for the public to track transparency and understand the decisions that their elected officials are making if there are emails flying back and forth behind the scenes, or if there are meetings happening that the public's not invited to. Even if it's only 1 or 2 council members in those meetings, it is much better practice to make your comments on a particular topic heard during a public meeting. Executive sessions are an exception to the OPMA for obvious reasons. There are discussions that need to be kept private, and they're not private forever. For example, pending or threatened litigation. The OPMA allows the council to go into an executive session to discuss that pending or threatened litigation. But after the decision to initiate litigation is made, or after a decision to settle litigation is made, that's all done in the open public meeting. It is not done in an executive session. So there are very limited exceptions to the OPMA listed here. And then there are 2 exclusions to the OPMA, meaning we don't have to have an exception. They just flat out are not subject to the rules of the Open Public Meetings Act. And the 2 that matter for our purposes our labor negotiations and during collective bargaining, and then deliberations of the council in a quasi judicial role. Many of you will remember that we got rid of the quasi judicial role for council in almost every circumstance, but there are still a limited number of circumstances where council will have to hear an appeal on things like local improvement districts or very limited other state requirements, where you will sit in a quasi judicial role and that is not subject to the OPMA. So OPMA violations, if a majority of the governing body meets and intends to transact official business and does in fact transact official business, that constitutes a violation. Here are some examples that we came up with for when the OPMA may be violated and not intentionally. Chamber luncheons, dinner parties, group text messages, run-ins at City Hall Council office, closed Facebook groups that not every member of the public has an opportunity to read, social events, surveys, reply all on emails. So whenever you intend to represent the city at a private event and you suspect that one or more of your fellow council members may also be present, please notify the city in advance so that we can err on the side of caution and notice the meeting to the public, just on the off chance that city business gets discussed at that event. What happens if there is a violation? Why does this all matter? The action is null and void and it cannot be ratified at a later meeting. That can harm city business and efficiency. If there was a discussion that, for example, was a vote that was taken at a meeting that only had 23 hours worth of notice, for example, it's null and void. You have to start from scratch, renotice the meeting, rediscuss the item, retake a vote, because you can't merely ratify what happened at the meeting that violated the OPMA. If there is a violation proven at trial, if the city gets sued, automatic attorney fees awarded to the suing party, to the plaintiff. Attorney fees are the most costly part of lawsuits, hands down. And they add up very, very quickly, especially for the attorneys that handle these types of cases. They're typically working for very big firms and have a high hourly rate. So generally speaking, the city indemnifies city council members and staff during civil lawsuits that are filed against them in their official capacity. So city council members can be subject to civil penalties if you attend a meeting knowing that it's in violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. And when you know that you are violating a law and it's not done in good faith, the city does not indemnify. That is the one caveat. It's an exception to the indemnification provision in our city code. So be very mindful of making, if it's a good faith mistake, you weren't positive that 4 members were going to show up that evening and they did, or something like that, there's some gray area there. But if you explicitly know that the meeting violates the OPMA and you have that discussion anyways, you will not be indemnified against all of these penalties that could come if you are sued. $500 for the first violation, up to $1,000 for each subsequent violation, subject to recall petitions, because this would be considered a violation of your duties of office. And then you could subject the city and the taxpayers to attorney fees for those violations. Again, most Open Public Meetings Act lawsuits are against both the city and the elected officials, and there is a good faith basis to have held the meeting. It is the very rare circumstance where it's egregious and council members would not be indemnified. So please, we ask of you, notify the city before attending social events where you suspect your fellow council members will be present. Notify Michelle Converse, our city clerk, so that we can make the decision about whether or not to provide public notice of the meeting. So here's a good case that really hammers home why I'm preaching at you about this so much. In Yakima County, 4 of the 5 commissioners attended a Chamber of Commerce luncheon. It cost $30 for the ticket. Many of the public could not afford to attend, so it was not technically open and available to the public. Each commissioner was asked to present on a variety of topics involving their county government. And at the end of the presentation, they were sitting up on the stage, and somebody in the audience asked about a matter that was pending before the Yakima County Council, marijuana use, marijuana businesses within the county. And each commissioner on the stage answered the question individually. And at the end of those answers, they each stated to the chamber luncheon that they would not seek another advisory vote on allowing marijuana businesses in unincorporated areas of the county. Okay, this was 4 members of the board, each individually said this on stage. So a local cannabis store owner filed a lawsuit against each commissioner and the county. They claimed violations of the OPMA because there was 1, no notice of this quorum of the board gathering, no agenda published, so they had no opportunity to defend themselves against this alleged vote from the stage. And it wasn't a public meeting because of the $30 entrance. The county disagreed, of course, that there was a violation. They defended themselves, saying that notice was provided and that no official vote or action was taken. We don't know how a court would have ruled on this because the county hedged its bets and it ended up settling the lawsuit for $13,000 prior to taking it to trial. But I can only imagine what the penalties may have been for this. This is a pretty egregious example of why the Open Public Meetings Act exists, because you do not want your governing bodies at private social events discussing city business when the public is not available to attend and be heard. So switching gears, are there questions on the OPMA and anything that we just covered there before I move on to our social media policy and wrap this up? No questions? Okay. So the Sumner social media policy applies to any social media platforms used by elected officials in their official capacity to communicate with constituents or the general public. The common ones are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, but the less common ones are LinkedIn or TikTok is a new big thing now. So be mindful of the fact that this policy applies to any social media outlet where you may be communicating with members of the public. And by the way, the City Council social media policy is included in tonight's packet. If you are interested in reading it or if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out. So the city needs to maintain and preserve all of those records and posts to platforms owned by the city. We do that. We contract with software companies that help us archive and make sure that we are keeping every single post, picture, comment, even things that are deleted actually on some of our platforms are still archived so that we can retrieve them in the case of a public records request. As council members, you are also responsible for preserving these records and posts that are on your own platforms. So even if they aren't ever requested in a public records request, there is an obligation to retain these records for a minimum, most of the time, of 6 years. So if you ever have questions about how long you need to keep emails or posts to your city Facebook account or things like that, before you ever hit the delete button, please communicate with city staff. We have a new staff member, records management specialist, and she is extremely knowledgeable in this and can answer your questions very quickly. On your city Facebook accounts or social media accounts, our tip is to link to the social media policy or put a disclaimer in your bio or at the top that you can pin that lets the public know that anything posted on this page could be subject to the Public Records Act. If you receive a request for public records in any manner, from a member of the public. So somebody stops you and Fred Meyer and says, hi, I heard that you passed a budget amendment. Could you send me a copy of that? That is a public records request. And it is vitally important that the city be aware of it so that we can fulfill it. There are deadlines, five days we have to respond. Go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So I do have a statement in the about on my page, the council page, that says that I'm speaking for myself, not for the whole council. But I don't know that, I don't think I have one that says it could be subject to OPMA. I can certainly add that, but I didn't catch when I set it up.
Yeah, we can work with you on a really short blurb. Mostly what you'd like to tell people is that anything that they post on your page or comment, it will be subject to the Public Records Act.
Okay, that's easy.
So we'd be glad to work with you on that.
Okay.
So again, if you receive something on the street, in the grocery store, via email, via telephone call that you think might be a public records request, please refer it to Michelle Converse or any staff member that you can get in touch with so that we can enter it into our software portal that processes and helps us fulfill all of these records requests in time. If we are delinquent in responding to public records requests, if we miss that strict 5-day deadline, we have assumed liability and penalties almost immediately. A couple of other reminders about the social media policy that was adopted by council. The same professional decorum and behavior that is expected during a public meeting is also expected on social media outlets. You represent yourself, but you also represent leaders in this community. And so the policy does emphasize professional behavior, professional comments. Don't engage in back and forth debate that can get really out of hand really quickly. Use it only to informally communicate with the public. Your city email account should be your default. And that's because it's archived and we can search it easily, but also because it's open and available to anybody. Some of these folks don't have Facebook, and so they're not able to see the comments back and forth, and especially if it's on private Facebook groups. Go ahead, Councilmember Reed.
Thanks. Sorry about that. But I've also got the, I think, again, the only one experiencing this is I do get, I don't know if I'd call it debate, but there's kind of sometimes Q&A or discussion on topics after something that's been posted or if an agenda has been shared. And it's kind of, sometimes it's describing what the item is, and sometimes people are offering or soliciting opinions of how something is going, but that should be all just, since that's all archived anyway, that's still within the realm of the council page.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you asked this question because it allows me a chance to clarify what I meant. I meant don't engage in inappropriate debate, foul language, language that would not represent the city of Sumner or the Sumner City Council members in a nice light. That's what I meant.
And I tend not to cuss out constituents anyway, so that's okay. Good.
So if you receive a public records request, please direct them to city staff or the city's website where there is a portal to put in a records request. Let's see, no decision making, accepting or soliciting public input on matters that will come before the council. This is another way to say, please don't make promises. Please don't infer how the city council may vote on any particular item. Do not use social media to speak for the council as a whole, but rather let the open public meetings speak for themselves. Do not delete or block commenters who disagree or are critical on social media. And this goes for city social media pages and private. If you're engaging in city business with constituents, even on a private Facebook or Instagram or Twitter account, please don't block or delete comments. Remember that when you're engaged in the city's business, there are certain rights of the public to be heard. They are limited public forums. And so it's important that they not be blocked or deleted unless they have engaged in some prohibited conduct according to our policy, inciting hate speech or fighting words. There are certain things that are not covered by the First Amendment and that are prohibited under our policy, but they are very few and far between. And then wherever possible, this is just a tip, be ADA friendly. If you've posted a video that might have audio and you can write in the caption what the video is discussing and some of the words that the video is saying for your deaf community, it's important to do that, and vice versa. If you've got a blind member of the community that might be unable to see the photograph that's been posted, the caption that can be read to them should describe what you've posted. So whenever possible, we recommend that you be ADA friendly. Again, reminder, just amplify what the city's putting out. There's an awful lot of time and effort that goes into all of the content that's on the city's website, all of the content on the city's social media pages. And especially during emergencies, we were reminded during the Hillside fire and, during the ever-changing rules related to the COVID pandemic, that even one word change in a message can confuse people and it can cause paranoia. And so if possible, please just relink and amplify what the city's already posting. And the other added benefit of that is many members of the public might not already follow the City of Sumner Instagram account. They might not be following the City of Sumner Twitter, but if they see you, their neighbors, their friends, their longtime trusted leaders posting something from the city, they might be inclined to go follow the city's accounts and get their information directly from the city that way. So again, just stop, pause before you create records. Should you be posting this, assume that every single thing you put in writing, in an email, in a text message that you say in an open public meeting or that you post online, it could very well end up on the front page of the newspaper. And it could also end up in a very expensive lawsuit. And so help us decrease that liability and risk by being mindful of everything that you say and do in public meetings and in public records. Are there any questions? Well, thank you for listening to me and Maylee for the last hour. We appreciate you very much. You all do a great job of this, but it's nice to have an annual refresher and reminder about why this all matters so much.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no more business before the council, I will adjourn this study session.
Have a good night, everyone.